In this tutorial video, I'm going to show how to use the Looker period control block to set up period over period analysis and standard tiles just using the period control feature. Down here, we have the filters and dimensions and measures associated with the period control block. To get started, I'm going to come down here and add number of periods, display dates in period labels, and under tile or dashboard filters, I'll add compare to, exclude days, number of trailing days, and period selection. That's the minimum essentially for a period over period analysis typically, though display dates and exclude days are optional depending on your needs. Down at the bottom here under pivot dimensions, we've got our period. I'll pivot on that. And then for this chart, I'm going to just choose date and period as our x-axis. I'll come up here and choose this as a measure. So going down this list here, display date and period labels, I'm going to turn that to yes. I'll show what that looks like in a moment. For this, we'll choose 3 periods, and we'll do a trailing, and I'll just set this up now. So trailing, and we'll do 28 days. And then exclude here, I'm going to choose exclude current day. And I'll go through this in a little more detail in a moment, but often if you have data that either pulls nightly or you don't want to show a partial day's worth of data, you would turn on exclude current day. All right, there we go. So the first period here is in green, second in red, and then we have a darker green for the third period. And oftentimes this sort of comparison is useful, especially if you have a running total, which I'll show that in just a few minutes. The first option we had was display date in period labels. That's what creates this view here. So it's going to show the user what date range is selected. If you turn that off, it will just say first period, second period, like this. I'll go ahead and turn that back on for the next round. Under period selection, your options are trailing, and then various week to date or last full week, month, quarter, year. I'll choose month to date here. At this point, number of trailing days has no effect. And for prior period, I can't choose trailing. So trailing as prior period is only an option with the trailing selection. However, the trailing selection can work with any of these so long as the number of trailing days is less than, for instance, 7, 30, 91, and 365. In this case, month to date can't be used with prior week or it will throw an error, and I'll just show what that looks like really quick. In a dashboard, there is a display block down here. You can turn on this first period date range. That also has error checking built in and will throw a big red warning to the user. So here you can see error cannot use month to date with prior week. So we'll switch that to prior month. All right. And so here we have current month versus prior, and no matter how many periods we add, it will keep on going back. Likewise, I could go with prior quarter, and it will select the prior quarter all the way back. The exclude days feature is designed to help deal with data that might not pull in real time. Typically, if data loads nightly or you don't want to show a partial day in your data set, you would choose exclude current day. Exclude yesterday is an option. Last data runs a select max function on your database and will find the largest date in your database and show data up to that point. Including future will allow future values. Max today will truncate the data at today or midnight of current day as the max data. And then you have end of last full week, month, quarter, and year. So for instance, if I said end of last full week here, and I did what, month to date, or better yet, I'll switch this to trailing, and we'll still look at prior quarter. And then end of last full week versus prior. And there we go. So we are going through 219. Today is Friday the 24th, and it is selected the end of the last full week. So that covers most of the filter options here. I'm going to take a look at a few other options, and to make this a little easier to look at, we'll just go to a prior period trailing. We'll exclude the current day, and I'm just going to go with 2 periods here. And I'm going to turn that off. What I'm going to look at next are a couple of other ways you can use this system to output various more complicated charts. So the first I'm going to talk about is actually what we would do down here is the usefulness of period duration. I'm going to click that, and that's a dimension. It's going to add days in period here. And what I'm going to do is get rid of that, and that way we will switch to just a single value card here. And I'm just going to run this really quick. Or here I'll add a calculation, and let's just do pivot index. And so I'm going to divide the current period's pivot index by the total days in period, which is going to give me my average rev per day. The reason this is important, I'll save that real quick, is because with variable user selectable variable periods, when you're on a dashboard, of course, you don't know what the user is going to select in terms of a date range. You need some way to be able to normalize to the number of days in the period. And I'll just set this to US dollars. And there we've got average revenue per day. Of course, this can be used in line charts and anything else. It doesn't have to just be a single value field. I'm going to put a date dimension back here. And what I'm going to do, actually, I'm sorry, I'm going to get rid of my date dimension. And I will put in day of week. And I'll go ahead and bump this up to about 6 periods. And this usually works best. I should have done like week to date for something like this. And then we're going to do versus prior week. I'll run that. This chart has now generated a comparison of the current period versus last, I'll just sort that, versus current Monday versus last Monday, and so on all the way back. It's an easy way to create a nice comparison chart that shows how the current week by day has done versus the prior weeks. Another handy thing you can do when you have lots of periods, we'll go up here to 14 and drop this. And I'll go back to a date here. And I'm just going to run this because we're going to need some table calculations. Actually, I'm going to switch back to trailing here. Now, what I'm going to do is add a couple table calculations. I'll just collapse that. So we'll add a calculation. We'll do a running total. change our sort order. So now we've got a running total, and that's kind of busy, but it does show, how things have gone for the last 14 periods. I'm going to add another table calculation here. And I will choose running total and 1. This is going to give me my first current period. We'll name this current period. And I'm going to go ahead and hide this now. All right, so I've just got my current period, then I'm going to add another, and we'll do a pivot index. And running total. Here I'm just going to change these to 2 through 14. And there, I've got the sum of the other 13 periods, not the first one, divided by 13, and this is going to be average of prior and there we go. We can compare the current period in green to the average of all the prior periods. I'm going to look at one more thing in this tutorial, and that's how to use this period control block to work with non-period over period tiles. For example, in a dashboard, it's very common to have a mix of period over period type tiles and tiles that are not showing period over period. In this case, these tiles here are showing a week at a time. So I'm going to go back here and I'll just get rid of my calculations. I'm going to get rid of my number of periods and compare to. So I'll be left with trailing 28 days, and I'll just make this bar chart. And then I'm going to change this. And at this point, we can run this and it will work just fine, controlling this chart despite not having multiple periods. Now, if we change this to, let's say, a week level, a common problem, and you can see here, the user sees a full week, this is date and period week, and expects that this tile, this first bar, is going to be a full week. It's obviously not, so to account for that, we will add the snap start date to and choose week. And the options are month, quarter, year, depending on what you've got set up down there. Oh, and I've made a mistake here, and I've left my period pivot in, so I'm just going to remove that really quick. And there we go. Now we've got a full week shown here. That's it for this tutorial. Thank you much.